The hospital waiting room smelled like antiseptic and broken dreams. Elliot Chen's fingers trembled as he stared at his phone screen, the cursor blinking mockingly in the text message box. For words. Just 4 simple words that would shatter the careful life he'd built over 7 years. For words that would bring back the man who had slowly, methodically dismantled his sense of self until he couldn't tell the difference between reality and the distorted funhouse mirror Adrian had held up to his face. Please save my child. His thumb hovered over the send button. In the hospital room behind him, his 6-year-old daughter lay sleeping, her small body dwarfed by machines that beeped and hummed, keeping track of a life that was slipping away like water through cupped hands. Mira, his miracle, his reason for breathing. The little girl with dinosaur pajamas and questions that could stump astrophysicists, who arranged her toy cars in perfect color-coded lines, and who looked at him with Adrian's storm gray eyes. Mr. Chun, the oncologist's voice was gentle, practiced in delivering devastation. Dr. Reeves had kind eyes, the sort of eyes that had seen too much death for someone barely 40. We've exhausted all options in the donor registry. I'm sorry, but without a direct family match. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Elliot's hand clenched around his phone, the edge biting into his palm. He'd known this was coming. Had known from the moment Dr. Reeves sat him down 3 weeks ago with that particular expression medical professionals wore when they were about to pull the ground from beneath your feet. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Aggressive. Rare blood type. Mira needed a bone marrow transplant. And the universe, in its infinite cruelty, had made sure that the only person in the entire country with compatible markers was the alpha Elliot had sworn he'd never speak to again. The alpha who had spent 3 years teaching him that his autistic brain couldn't be trusted, that his perceptions were skewed, that his feelings were overreactions, that he was too sensitive, too rigid, too broken to understand how love actually worked. There's no one else? Elliot heard himself ask, even though he'd already memorized the statistics. Dr. Reeves had explained it 17 times in 17 different ways, probably because she'd noticed the way Elliot needed information repeated, needed to hear it from multiple angles before his mind could accept it as truth. She was good like that. She'd picked up on his patterns quickly, learned that he couldn't handle surprise conversations, that he needed warnings before topic changes, that eye contact felt like staring into the sun. I'm afraid not. The father. Dr. Reeves consulted her tablet, though they both knew she had this memorized too. Dr. Adrian Cross. He's a 98% match. That's extraordinarily high. With someone that compatible, Myra's chances of survival jump to 75%. Without a transplant. She paused, and Elliot appreciated that she didn't sugarcoat it. We're looking at weeks, maybe a month or 2 if we're lucky. Weeks. His daughter had weeks. Elliot's vision tunneled, the waiting room shrinking to just his phone screen and those 4 words. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a frequency that normally scraped against his nerves like sandpaper, but right now he couldn't feel anything except the crushing weight of a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. He pressed send. The message delivered with a soft whoosh that sounded far too cheerful for what it represented. Elliot stared at the screen, watching the single check mark turn into 2. Then his stomach dropped, watching those check marks turn blue. Read? His phone vibrated immediately. Adrian was calling. Elliot's hand started shaking so violently he nearly dropped the phone. His heart hammered against his ribs, each beat screaming danger, danger, danger in a primal rhythm that bypassed all logic. His therapist called this a trauma response, the way his body remembered what his mind tried to forget. 7 years, and Adrian's name on a screen could still make him feel like he was drowning. The phone rang, and rang, and rang. Dr. Reeves was watching him with concern. Mr. Chun, are you all right? Should I? Elliot, answer the call. Elliot. Adrian's voice poured through the speaker, smooth as aged whiskey and just as dangerous. 7 years had done nothing to change that voice, the one that used to whisper loving words that felt like silk hiding razors. Elliot, what? Whose child? What are you talking about? The waiting room felt like it was tilting. Elliot gripped the edge of his chair, focusing on the sensation of plastic digging into his palm. Grounding technique number 4. Find 5 things you can touch. Chair, phone, the worn hem of his jacket, the hospital bracelet on his wrist that labeled him as Myra's father, the small stuffed brachiosaurus in his pocket that Mira had insisted he keep safe while she slept. Yours, Elliot managed, and his voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. Our daughter. She's dying, and you're the only one who can save her. The silence that followed was so complete that Elliot checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Then Adrian made a sound like he'd been punched in the chest, a breathless, wounded noise that Elliot felt in his bones despite everything. I have a daughter? Adrian's voice cracked on the word. We have a... Elliot, what the hell are you talking about? You left 7 years ago. You just vanished, and now you're telling me I have a daughter? Yes. The word came out flat, emotionless. Elliot had practiced this conversation in his head for 3 weeks, had scripted it out like he scripted every difficult interaction. But now that it was happening, all his carefully prepared words were evaporating like morning dew. Mira, she's 6. She has your blood type, your eyes, your stubborn chin. And she has acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Jesus Christ. Adrian sounded like he was moving, the audio picking up the rustle of fabric, footsteps, a door slamming. Where are you? What hospital? I'm coming right now. Don't you dare disappear on me again. Elliot, I swear to God. St. Catherine's Medical Center. Pediatric Oncology, room 347. Elliot rattled off the address, his brain helpfully providing precise directions because that's what it did in a crisis. Focused on concrete details while his emotions tried to tear him apart. But you can't see her. I just need you to get tested, and if you're a match, I need you to donate bone marrow. That's all. That's all. Adrian's laugh was sharp, borderline hysterical. You drop this bombshell and expect me to just know? Absolutely not. I'm not doing a goddamn thing until you explain to me how I have a 6-year-old daughter I knew nothing about. And there it was. The control, sliding back into Adrian's voice like a key into a well-worn lock. The subtle shift in tone that meant he was done being shocked and was now deciding how this situation would proceed. Elliot had heard that shift 1,000 times during their marriage. Right before Adrian would start explaining to him why his version of events was wrong, why he was misremembering, why he was being irrational. She's dying, Elliot repeated, and something in his voice must have been sharp enough to cut through Adrian's shock because the alpha went quiet. Your daughter is dying, Adrian. You can be angry at me. You can hate me. You can do whatever you want after, but right now, I need you to save her life. Please. The please tasted like acid in his mouth. Elliot had sworn he'd never beg this man for anything ever again. Had sworn he'd rather die than put himself back in Adrian's orbit, back in range of that subtle emotional manipulation that left no bruises but carved wounds so deep they still hadn't healed. But this wasn't about him. This was about Mira, who was sleeping 30 feet away with poison in her blood and hope running out. I'll be there in 20 minutes, Adrian said, and the line went dead. Elliot sat there, phone pressed to his ear long after the call ended, his entire body locked in a freeze response that his therapist said was just as valid as fight or flight. Dr. Reeves was saying something, asking him questions probably, but the words were distant, muffled, like he was hearing them from the bottom of a swimming pool. 20 minutes. In 20 minutes, Adrian Cross would walk back into his life, and Elliot wasn't sure he'd survive it. But Mira would. That was all that mattered. He stood on shaking legs and walked back to room 347, where his daughter slept on, oblivious to the fact that her entire world was about to change. She looked so small in that hospital bed, her black hair splayed across the pillow, her brown skin ashen in a way that made Elliot's chest ache. She'd inherited his Korean features, softened with melanin from a grandmother she'd never meet. And those eyes, those devastating gray eyes that were pure Adrian. Elliot settled into the chair beside her bed, the same chair he'd been living in for 3 weeks, and picked up her small hand. Her fingers were cool, too cool, and decorated with child-safe press-on nails painted with tiny dinosaurs because Mira loved dinosaurs more than anything in the world except maybe her papa. I'm sorry, little moon, he whispered, using the nickname he'd given her when she was born, when she'd open her eyes and looked at him like he'd hung the stars just for her. "I'm so sorry I have to do this." Mira stirred, her nose scrunching in that way she did when she was dreaming about something that confused her. She was autistic like him, diagnosed at 3, and they'd built such a beautiful world together, just the two of them. A world of routines and rituals, of special interests shared in sensory-friendly spaces, of communication that didn't require masking or pretending to be someone they weren't. Adrian was going to destroy all of that. Adrian, who had spent their entire marriage trying to fix Elliot's autism like it was a bug in faulty coding, who had dismissed his need for routine as inflexibility, who had called his stimmying habits embarrassing and his special interests obsessive. Adrian, who was about to meet the daughter he never knew existed, a daughter who was autistic just like the Omega he'd emotionally brutalized. Elliot's stomach turned, while rising in his throat. He was going to be sick. He was going to have a full meltdown right here in this hospital room. And then what? Who would protect Mira when her papa was falling apart? He pressed his forehead against Myra's small hand and tried to remember how to breathe. The door opened 17 minutes later. Not 20. Adrian had always been the type to show up early, to be prepared, to maintain control through punctuality and perfect presentation. Elliot didn't look up. He couldn't. If he looked at Adrian, he would shatter into 1,000 pieces, and he needed to hold himself together just a little bit longer. Elliot. Adrian's voice filled the room, and God, it was the same. 7 years. And it was exactly the same. That particular blend of concern and command that made you feel cared for while simultaneously reminding you that he was the one in charge. "Look at me." Elliot kept his eyes on Myra's hand, on her tiny fingers with their dinosaur nails. "Did you come alone?" His voice was steady. He was proud of that, proud that years of therapy had taught him how to sound calm, even when his nervous system was screaming. "Of course I came alone." "You said." Adrian stopped, and Elliot heard the moment he saw Mira, the sharp intake of breath, the footsteps that faltered. "Oh my God." Elliot's hands tightened fractionally on Myra's. "This is Mira. She's 6 years and 4 months old. She likes dinosaurs, specifically sauropods, because they're herbivores, and she doesn't like thinking about animals eating each other. She's autistic. She needs warnings before transitions. She goes nonverbal when she's overwhelmed, and she doesn't like being touched by people she doesn't know." He was reciting facts like a medical chart, because that's all he could manage right now. If he thought about the emotion behind those facts, about how Mira would light up when talking about Brachiosaurus herds, about how she'd take his hand and squeeze it 3 times to say "I love you" when words were too hard, he would start crying, and he couldn't cry in front of Adrian. Adrian moved closer, and Elliot's entire body tensed, a prey animal sensing a predator in its peripheral vision. "She has my eyes," Adrian breathed, and there was wonder in his voice, genuine awe that made something twist painfully in Elliot's chest. "Yes. And you said she's autistic?" "Like me." Silence. Heavy, weighted silence that pressed down on Elliot's shoulders like a physical thing. He knew what Adrian was thinking. He knew because he'd heard it 100 times during their marriage. Concern about genetics, about passing on defective traits, about how hard life would be for a child like that. But Adrian surprised him. "She's beautiful," he said softly. "Elliot, God, I can't believe this. I can't believe we made this perfect person and I didn't even know." Elliot's throat tightened. He finally looked up because he needed to see if Adrian was lying. Needed to check his facial expressions, read his body language, search for the micro-expressions that would tell him this was manipulation, another game. Adrian looked wrecked. His hair was disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. His expensive suit jacket was missing, and his eyes, those gray eyes Mira had inherited, were red-rimmed and glassy. He looked older than Elliot remembered, stress lines carved deep around his mouth, and there was something in his expression that Elliot couldn't quite parse. Grief, maybe, or shock so profound it mimicked grief. "Why didn't you tell me?" Adrian's voice cracked. "Elliot, why didn't you tell me you were pregnant?" This was the question Elliot had been dreading. The one he'd practiced answering in therapy, role-playing with his counselor, until he could say the words without his voice shaking. But now, with Adrian standing 3 feet away, all those practice phrases dissolved into nothing. Because I was terrified you'd convince me I was unfit to be a parent, Elliot said, and the honesty of it felt like pulling out his own teeth. Because you'd spent 3 years telling me I couldn't trust my own mind. Because I was planning my suicide, Adrian, and the only thing that stopped me was feeling her kick and realizing she needed me to be stronger than what you'd made me believe I was. Adrian's face went white. Actually white, the color draining so fast Elliot thought he might pass out. Elliot, I never. Don't. The word came out sharper than Elliot intended, and Mira stirred in her sleep, her face scrunching. He immediately lowered his voice, softening it. Don't tell me what you did or didn't do. Not right now. Right now, I need you to go down to the 3rd floor, find Dr. Reeves in oncology, and get tested. If you're a match, I need you to agree to donate. That's all. That's not all, Adrian said, and there was steel in his voice now. The shock was wearing off, and underneath it, Elliot could see the alpha he remembered, the one who didn't accept limitations, who pushed until he got what he wanted. I have a daughter, Elliot, a daughter who's dying. You can't seriously expect me to just donate bone marrow and walk away. Why not? Elliot met his eyes, forcing himself not to look away, even though it felt like staring into the sun. You're biologically related to her. That's all. Biology doesn't make you a father. You don't know her. You don't know her favorite color or what she eats for breakfast or how to calm her down when she's having a meltdown. You're a stranger to her. Because you made me a stranger, Adrian shot back, his voice rising. Mira whimpered, and both men froze. Adrian looked stricken, immediately lowering his voice. You took that choice away from me. You don't get to use that as a weapon now. He was right. God, he was right. And Elliot hated it. Hated that Adrian had a legitimate grievance. Hated that his decision to keep Mira a secret could be framed as cruel. Hated that the situation was so much more complicated than abuse victim protects child from abuser. You're right, Elliot admitted, because his therapist had taught him that acknowledging truth didn't mean accepting blame for protecting himself. I did take that choice from you, and I'd do it again, because the alternative was risking you doing to her what you did to me. Adrian flinched like he'd been slapped. I never hurt you. You made me doubt my own sanity. Elliot's voice was quiet, but the words landed like stones in still water. You gaslit me so thoroughly that I didn't trust my own memories. You dismissed every concern I had as anxiety or overreaction. You told me my autism made me unreliable, that I misread situations, that I was too sensitive. You never hit me, Adrian, but you broke me anyway. I was trying to help you. Adrian's hands clenched into fists at his sides. You were always so anxious, so worried about everything. I thought if I could just help you see things more rationally. Stop. Elliot stood up, his body moving between Adrian and Mira on pure instinct. Stop rewriting history. You weren't helping me. You were controlling me. And I'm not doing this right now. Go get tested or don't. But if you choose not to, if you let your pride or your anger or whatever you're feeling right now get in the way of saving her life, then you're even worse than I thought you were. They stared at each other, the air between them crackling with 7 years of unresolved hurt and anger and grief. Adrian's jaw worked like he was physically restraining words that wanted to escape. His eyes darted between Elliot and Mira, and Elliot could see the war happening behind them. Pride versus responsibility, anger versus guilt. Finally, Adrian's shoulders dropped. Of course I'll get tested. I'll donate whatever she needs. But Elliot, this conversation isn't over. You can't just... Yes, I can, Elliot interrupted. I can, and I will, because right now the only thing that matters is Mira. Everything else is secondary. Adrian looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Elliot's expression must have convinced him it was futile. Fine. Where do I go? 3rd floor. Ask for Dr. Reeves. Tell her you're Mira Chen's biological father. The words tasted strange in Elliot's mouth. Father. Adrian was her father in the genetic sense, but that was where it ended. That was where it had to end. Adrian nodded stiffly and turned toward the door, but paused with his hand on the handle. Can I look at her? Just for a minute. Every instinct Elliot had screamed no. Screamed to get Adrian away from his daughter, to protect her from this man who had systematically dismantled his sense of self. But he looked at Adrian's face, saw the naked longing there, and found himself nodding despite his better judgment. Adrian approached the bed slowly, like Mira was a wild animal that might bolt. He stopped at the foot of the bed, his hands gripping the rail, and just stared. His eyes traced every feature: the slope of her nose, the curve of her cheek, the small hand curled against the pillow. A tear slid down his face, and he didn't bother wiping it away. "She's perfect," he whispered. "Elliot, she's absolutely perfect." And despite everything, despite all the hurt and anger and fear, Elliot found himself agreeing. "Yes, she is." Adrian tore his eyes away from Mira and looked at Elliot, and something passed between them in that moment. A shared grief for what could have been, for the family they might have been if things had been different. If Adrian had been different. If Elliot had been stronger. If the universe hadn't conspired to break them both. Then the moment shattered, and Adrian was walking out the door, and Elliot was alone with his daughter and the crushing weight of what he'd just set in motion. He sank back into his chair, his legs suddenly unable to support his weight. Myra's hand was still in his, small and cool and utterly trusting. She had no idea that her entire world had just tilted on its axis. No idea that the man who just stared at her with tears in his eyes was her father. No idea that saving her life meant inviting danger back into their carefully constructed safe space. "I'm sorry," Elliot whispered again, pressing Myra's hand to his cheek. "I'm so sorry, baby. But I promise I'll keep you safe. Even from him. Especially from him." Myra's eyes fluttered open, storm gray and confused. "Papa." Her voice was rough from sleep and pain medication. "Was someone here?" Elliot's heart clenched. "Just a doctor, little moon. Go back to sleep." She accepted this easily, the way children did, and let her eyes drift closed again. Elliot watched her breathe, counting each inhale and exhale like prayers. He just made a deal with the devil to save an angel. Now he could only hope they'd both survive what came next. The testing took 3 hours. 3 hours that Elliot spent in a state of hyper-awareness, every nerve ending raw and exposed. He couldn't settle, couldn't focus on the book he'd brought or the phone in his hand. He just paced the small hospital room, wearing a path in the linoleum while Mira slept and woke and slept again, her small body fighting a war it was losing. When Dr. Reeves finally knocked on the door, Elliot nearly jumped out of his skin. "Mr. Chun, can I speak with you outside?" Elliot's stomach dropped. He looked at Mira, who was awake now and watching him with those two knowing eyes. She'd always been perceptive, picking up on emotions the way some kids picked up languages. She knew something was wrong, had known since the diagnosis, when she'd watched him cry silently in the bathroom and had left her favorite Brachiosaurus toy outside the door as an offering of comfort. "I'll be right back," he promised, kissing her forehead. 5 minutes. 5 minutes, she repeated, because time was concrete when you gave her numbers. She held up 5 fingers to confirm, and Elliot's heart cracked a little more. In the hallway, Dr. Reeves had her professional face on, the one that gave nothing away. Beside her stood Adrian, looking exhausted and wrung out, his sleeves rolled up and a small bandage on his inner elbow. "Is he a match?" Elliot asked, skipping all pleasantries because his brain couldn't handle small talk right now. "Better than a match," Dr. Reeves said, and something in her expression softened into relief. "Dr. Cross is a 98% compatibility. It's extraordinary, honestly. With numbers like that, we're looking at a 75 to 80% survival rate post-transplant." The floor seemed to tilt beneath Elliot's feet. 75%. Mira had a 75% chance of surviving this. After weeks of watching her deteriorate, of being told to prepare for the worst, to make arrangements, 75% felt like a miracle. "When can we do the transplant?" Elliot asked, his voice unsteady. Dr. Reeves hesitated, and that hesitation made Elliot's brief spark of relief gutter out. "There's a complication. Myra's white blood cell count is too high right now. Her body is fighting too hard, ironically. We need to get her into remission before we can attempt the transplant, which means aggressive chemotherapy for the next 6 to 8 weeks." 6 to 8 weeks. 6 to 8 weeks of Mira getting sicker before she could get better. 6 to 8 weeks of watching her suffer. 6 to 8 weeks of Adrian hovering in their lives, waiting. And during that time, Elliot heard himself ask, "What happens?" We monitor her closely. The chemo is harsh, and there's a risk of infection, of her body becoming too weak to handle the transplant. Dr. Cross will need to stay available, undergo additional testing to ensure he remains healthy and compatible. After the transplant, there's a recovery period of several months where Mira will need intensive care and monitoring. Several months. Adrian would be part of their lives for several months. Elliot looked at the alpha, who was watching him with an unreadable expression. "You're willing to do this? All of it?" "Of course I am," Adrian said, and there was heat in his voice. "She's my daughter, Elliot. What kind of person do you think I am?" "I know exactly what kind of person you are," Elliot thought, but he didn't say it. Instead, he nodded. "Thank you." The words felt wrong in his mouth, thanking Adrian for doing the bare minimum of saving his own child's life. But social conventions demanded it, and Elliot had learned to follow social scripts even when they made no sense. "There's something else," Adrian said, and Elliot's defenses immediately went up. "I want to see her. Really see her, I mean, while she's awake. I want to meet my daughter." "No." The word was out before Elliot could stop it, sharp and flat. "Absolutely not. Elliot, she doesn't know you exist," Elliot said, his voice rising despite his best efforts to keep it level. "She's 6 years old and dying and terrified. I'm not going to add surprise. You have a father to the list of traumas she's dealing with right now. She has a right to know," Adrian insisted. "I have a right. You have no rights." Elliot cut him off, and the words came out vicious, sharp enough to draw blood. "You have biology. That's all. You don't get to waltz in here and demand anything from her or from me." Dr. Reeves cleared her throat, clearly uncomfortable with the direction this conversation was taking. "Perhaps this is a discussion for later? The important thing right now is that we have a viable donor and can move forward with treatment." But Adrian wasn't backing down. Elliot could see it in the set of his jaw, the way his shoulders squared. This was the Adrian he remembered, the one who didn't hear no, who reframed it as "not yet," or "you're being unreasonable," or "let me explain why you're wrong." "I'm not asking for much," Adrian said, his voice dropping into that reasonable, rational tone that used to make Elliot doubt himself. "Just a chance to meet her, to introduce myself, to let her know that she has a father who cares about her." "You don't know her well enough to care about her," Elliot shot back. "You care about the idea of her. You care about your wounded pride and your guilt, and you need to feel like you're doing the right thing. But you don't actually care about what's best for Mira. And you do." Adrian's eyes flashed. "You, who kept her existence a secret for 6 years. You, who waited until she was dying to contact me. You want to talk about what's best for her?" The words hit like physical blows, each one landing exactly where Adrian intended. This was what he did: found your weak spots and pressed on them until you folded, until you started questioning yourself, wondering if maybe he was right, if maybe you were being unreasonable. But Elliot had spent 7 years in therapy learning to recognize this pattern, learning that his boundaries were valid even when someone else called them unreasonable. "Yes," he said quietly, "I do, because I've been there every day of her life. I've held her through nightmares and meltdowns. I've learned her communication style, her triggers, her needs. I've built a life around keeping her safe and happy and loved. You want to meet her? Fine, but you'll do it on my terms when I decide she's ready. And if I even suspect you're doing more harm than good, you'll be gone so fast you won't have time to blink." Adrian stared at him, something complicated flickering across his face. Anger, yes, but also something that might have been respect. Or surprise. It was hard to tell. "Your terms," Adrian repeated slowly. "All right, what are your terms?" Elliot blinked. He'd expected more of a fight, expected Adrian to push back, to argue, to explain why Elliot was wrong. The fact that he'd conceded, even partially, was so unexpected that Elliot's carefully constructed arguments evaporated. I need to think about it," he admitted. "I need to talk to Myra's therapist, figure out the best way to introduce the concept. She doesn't do well with surprises." "Neither do you," Adrian said softly, and there was no judgment in it, just observation. It was the first kind thing Adrian had said to him in 7 years, and Elliot didn't know what to do with it. His brain, already overloaded with stress and fear and sensory input, simply couldn't process this version of Adrian, the one who seemed to remember what he needed, who wasn't pushing for more than Elliot could give. "I'll call you," Elliot said finally, "after I talk to her therapist, after I figure out how to do this without traumatizing her more than she's already been traumatized." Adrian nodded. He pulled out his phone, typed something, and Elliot's phone buzzed. "That's my personal cell. Call anytime, day or night. I mean it, Elliot. Whatever you need, whenever you need it." The offer felt like a trap. Everything with Adrian felt like a trap, beautiful and baited and ready to snap shut. But Elliot took the number, saved it, and nodded. Dr. Reeves, sensing the ceasefire, jumped in. "I'll start Mira on her first round of chemo tomorrow morning. The side effect can be rough: nausea, fatigue, hair loss. We'll manage her pain as best we can, but I won't lie to you, Mr. Chun. The next few weeks are going to be very difficult," as if they hadn't been difficult already. But Elliot nodded, accepting this new level of hell because there was no other choice. "What I need to do, be there for her, keep her comfortable, and try to stay strong." Dr. Reeves's smile was sympathetic. "I know that's easier said than done." Elliot almost laughed. Stay strong. As if strength was something he had in surplus right now, as if he wasn't held together by sheer willpower and the terror of falling apart in front of his daughter. But he nodded again, because that's what you did. You nodded and you smiled and you pretended you weren't drowning, right up until the moment you were pulled under. Adrian was still standing there, looking like he wanted to say something else. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Finally, he settled on, "Take care of her. Both of you." Then he was walking away, his footsteps echoing down the hospital corridor, and Elliot was left standing in the hallway with Dr. Reeves and the crushing weight of what was coming. He went back into Myra's room. She was sitting up now, her thin arms wrapped around the stuffed brachiosaurus that was almost as big as she was. "Papa, you were gone 8 minutes. I'm sorry, little moon. The doctor needed to talk to me. About the medicine, she was too smart as girl. Had figured out within days that the doctors here weren't like the doctors at her pediatrician's office, that the medicine they were giving her wasn't the kind that made you feel better." "Yes, about the medicine. Is it going to hurt?" Elliot's chest constricted. He sat on the edge of her bed, careful not to jostle her. "It might make you feel yucky for a while, but it's going to help you get better." Mira considered this, her gray eyes serious in a way no 6-year-old should be. "Papa, am I going to die?" The question hit him like a freight train. For a moment, he couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare at his baby girl and try to figure out how to answer that. His therapist had coached him on this, had told him that autistic children often needed direct, honest answers even when those answers were terrifying. "Not if I can help it," he said, and his voice only shook a little. "The doctors found medicine that can help you. It's going to be hard, and you're going to feel sick for a while, but I'm going to be right here with you the whole time." Okay. She leaned against him, her small body trembling. "I'm scared, Papa." "I know, baby. I'm scared too. But you're staying? I'm not going anywhere. I promise." She seemed satisfied with this, settling back against her pillows. Elliot pulled the blankets up around her, tucking in her brachiosaurus. As he moved to sit back down in his chair, Myra's small hand caught his. "Papa?" "The man in my room earlier. The one you said was a doctor. He didn't look like the other doctors." Elliot's blood went cold. "What do you mean?" "He looked sad. Like you look when you think I'm sleeping, but you're actually crying in the bathroom." God, she saw too much. Understood too much. Elliot wanted to protect her from all of this, but she was living it right alongside him. "Everyone's sad when people they care about are sick," he said carefully, which wasn't a lie even if it wasn't the whole truth. Mira seemed to accept this, her eyes already drifting closed again. The medication made her drowsy, and she slept more than she was awake these days. Elliot watched her for a long moment, memorizing her face the way he did every night, terrified that one of these times would be the last time. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, except he knew exactly who it was. Asterisk, "Thank you for letting me help. I know this doesn't fix anything, but I meant what I said. Whatever you need, I'm here." Asterisk. Elliot stared at the message, his thumb hovering over the delete button. But he didn't delete it. Instead, he saved the number under Adrian and put his phone away. Whatever you need, Adrian had said. What Elliot needed was for the last 7 years to have never happened. He needed Mira to be healthy. He needed a universe where he didn't have to choose between his daughter's life and his own safety. But that universe didn't exist. This one did. The one where his daughter was dying, and the only person who could save her was the man who had broken him so thoroughly he still wasn't sure all the pieces had been found. Elliot leaned his head back against the chair and closed his eyes. Tomorrow, Mira would start chemo. Tomorrow, they would begin the long, brutal journey toward either survival or goodbye. And somewhere in that journey, he would have to figure out how to let Adrian into their lives without letting him destroy what they'd built. Tomorrow. But tonight, he could just sit here with his daughter, holding her hand, pretending that the world outside this room didn't exist. The first round of chemotherapy started at 6 in the morning, administered through the port they'd surgically placed in Myra's chest 2 weeks ago. Elliot held her hand while the nurse connected the 4, watching the clear liquid begin its journey into his daughter's body. Poison designed to kill the poison already there. Medicine that would make her sicker before it could make her better. "It's cold, Papa," Mira said, her voice small. She could feel the medication traveling through her veins, and her little face scrunched in discomfort. "I know, baby. Squeeze my hand if it helps." She squeezed, her small fingers tightening around his. The nurse, a kind woman named Patricia who'd been on this floor for 20 years, smiled encouragingly. "You're doing so great, sweetie. So brave." Mira didn't respond, too focused on the strange sensations in her body. Elliot watched her face, cataloging every micro-expression, ready to call for help if she showed signs of distress. But she just lay there, gripping his hand, being far braver than any 6-year-old should have to be. By noon, the nausea started. By 3, Mira was vomiting into a basin while Elliot rubbed her back and whispered soothing nonsense. By evening, she was so exhausted she could barely keep her eyes open, but every time she started to drift off, her body would rack with dry heaves, and she'd jerk awake again. Elliot felt helpless. Completely, utterly helpless. He was supposed to protect her, supposed to make everything better, but all he could do was hold her hair back and wipe her face with a cool cloth and watch her suffer. "Make it stop, Papa," she whimpered after the 10th round of vomiting. "Please make it stop." "I can't, little moon. I'm so sorry, but I can't." His voice broke on the last word, tears finally spilling over. He'd been trying so hard to stay strong, to be brave for her, but watching her like this was breaking him in ways he didn't know he could still break. Patricia came in with more anti-nausea medication, but it barely touched the symptoms. This was just day 1. They had weeks of this ahead of them. Around 8 that evening, while Mira was finally sleeping fitfully, Elliot's phone buzzed. "How is she?" "Adrian." Elliot stared at the message, his exhausted brain struggling to formulate a response. "How is she?" She was being poisoned to save her life. She was suffering in ways that made him want to tear his own skin off because at least that pain would be his own instead of something he was helpless to stop. "Sick," he typed back. "First day of chemo." The response came immediately. Asterisk, "Do you need anything? Food? Coffee? I can bring whatever you need." Asterisk. "No." A pause, then, "Elliot, when was the last time you ate?" Elliot tried to remember. Yesterday? The day before? Time had stopped meaning anything beyond the medication schedule and Myra's sleep patterns. Food was something other people did, people who weren't watching their children die by degrees. "I'm fine." That's not an answer. Elliot almost threw his phone across the room. Adrian didn't get to do this, didn't get to act concerned, didn't get to pretend he cared about Elliot's well-being after spending 3 years systematically destroying it. But even as he thought it, his traitorous body reminded him that Adrian was right. He hadn't eaten. His hands were shaking from more than just stress, and there was a dizzy, floating quality to his thoughts that meant his blood sugar was bottoming out. Asterisk, fine. There's a cafeteria on the first floor. Asterisk, he regretted the message the moment he sent it, but it was too late to take back. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. Elliot wanted to argue, But Mira was sleeping, and he didn't want to start a text fight that might result in his phone buzzing and waking her up. So he just put his phone down and tried to figure out how he felt about the fact that Adrian was coming. He settled on numb. Numb was safe. Numb meant he didn't have to feel the complicated tangle of fear and anger and desperate hope that Adrian's presence inspired. 28 minutes later, because of course Adrian would be early, there was a soft knock on the door. Elliot carefully extracted his hand from Myra's, tucked her brachiosaurus closer to her side, and stepped into the hallway. Adrian looked different in casual clothes. Less intimidating, somehow. He was wearing jeans and a soft gray sweater, his hair slightly damp like he'd just showered, and he was carrying 2 bags that smelled like actual food instead of hospital cafeteria sadness. "You didn't have to come all the way here," Elliot said, even though part of him, a part he didn't want to examine too closely, was grateful he had. "Yes, I did." Adrian held out one of the bags. "Thai food from that place on Maple Street. You used to like their pad, CEW." Elliot took the bag, automatically, too stunned to do anything else. Adrian remembered his favorite dish from a restaurant they'd gone to 7 years ago. That felt significant in a way Elliot couldn't quite process. "Thank you," he said stiffly. "Can we?" Adrian gestured vaguely down the hallway. "Can we sit while you eat? Or do you need to stay close to her?" Elliot glanced back at the door to Myra's room. She was sleeping, and Patricia was at the nurse's station just 20 feet away. He had his phone. If anything changed, he'd know immediately. 20 minutes, he said. That's all. They found an empty waiting area, worn chairs and outdated magazines and fluorescent lights that buzzed at a frequency that made Elliot's teeth ache. Adrian sat down and pulled out his own container of food, though Elliot noticed he didn't actually eat any of it. Just pushed it around with his fork while Elliot mechanically consumed pad CEW that tasted like absolutely nothing. "How bad is it?" Adrian asked quietly. "The chemo. Bad." Elliot didn't see the point in sugarcoating it. "She's been vomiting every hour. The anti-nausea medication isn't helping much. She's exhausted but can't sleep because her body won't stop trying to reject the poison we're putting in it. And this is just day one." Adrian's face crumpled, actual visible pain crossing his features. "God, I'm so sorry. Don't apologize for her being sick. You didn't give her leukemia." "No, but I—" Adrian stopped, seeming to struggle with something. "I should have been there. From the beginning. If you'd felt safe enough to tell me you were pregnant, maybe things would have been different. Maybe she would have had 2 parents instead of one exhausted Omega, doing everything alone." The words were so unexpected that Elliot just stared at him. Was Adrian actually taking responsibility? Acknowledging his role in how things had fallen apart? "You're right," Elliot said slowly. "If I felt safe, I would have told you. But I didn't feel safe, Adrian. I felt like I was drowning, and you were the one holding me underwater while telling me I was being dramatic about needing air." Adrian flinched. "I know. God, Elliot, I know. I've been in therapy for 5 years, trying to unpack all the ways I failed you. All the ways my family's toxic bullshit warped my understanding of what a relationship should be. I know saying I'm sorry doesn't fix anything, but I am. I'm so fucking sorry for what I put you through." Elliot's fork clattered against his container. He stared at Adrian, looking for the trap, the manipulation, the twist that would turn this apparent accountability into another form of control. But Adrian just looked broken, genuinely, sincerely broken in a way that made something uncomfortable squirm in Elliot's chest. 5 years, Elliot heard himself ask. Since 6 months after you left. I had a breakdown, realized I had no idea why you'd gone, started going through a relationship, trying to figure out what I'd done wrong. Adrian laughed, but it was bitter, self-deprecating. "Turns out, it was pretty much everything. My therapist specializes in alphas who've been abusive to their partners. It's been enlightening. Horrifying, but enlightening." "Why are you telling me this?" Elliot's voice came out sharper than he intended. "Do you want absolution? Forgiveness? Because I can't give you that, Adrian. I don't have it to give." "No." Adrian shook his head. "I'm telling you because you deserve to know that I understand now. That the person who hurt you isn't who I am anymore. Or at least I'm trying not to be. I'm not expecting anything from you, Elliot. I needed you to know that I see it now. I see what I did. Elliot didn't know what to say to that. Part of him wanted to rage, to scream that seeing it now didn't undo the damage. Part of him wanted to cry, because wasn't this what he needed 7 years ago? For Adrian to just fucking see him? But mostly he was just tired. Too tired to be angry. Too tired to process the implications of Adrian's words. Too tired to do anything except exist in this moment. Okay, he said finally. You see it. Now what? Now nothing. Now I donate bone marrow. I stay out of your way as much as possible. And if you ever decide you want me to be part of Myra's life, I'll be there. But I'm not going to push. I'm not going to demand. I'm done taking things from you, Elliot. It sounded too good to be true. People didn't just change like that, didn't just recognize their patterns and stop. Especially not alphas from old money families who've been raised to believe omegas existed to be protected and controlled. But looking at Adrian's face, Elliot found himself wanting to believe it anyway. Maybe because he was desperate. Maybe because 7 years of therapy had taught him that people could change, theoretically. Maybe because he was so fucking exhausted he didn't have the energy to maintain his walls anymore. I talked to Myra's therapist, Elliot said, surprising himself. He hadn't planned to bring this up now, but the words were spilling out anyway. About how to tell her about you. She suggested starting with small facts, working up to the bigger truth. But Myra's so sick right now, I don't know if adding the stress is fair to her. Whatever you think is best, Adrian said immediately. I trust your judgment. Those 5 words, asterisk I trust your judgment asterisk, hit Elliot like a physical blow. Adrian had never said that during their marriage, had never trusted Elliot's judgment about anything, had always needed to weigh in, to correct, to explain why Elliot's perspective was skewed. Don't, Elliot said, his voice rough. Don't say things like that unless you mean them. I mean it. Adrian's eyes were steady on his. You're her father. You've been there for every moment of her life. Your judgment about what she needs is the only one that matters. Elliot's throat tightened. He looked away, focusing on his half-eaten food, because if he kept looking at Adrian, he was going to do something stupid like believe this was real. His phone buzzed. Patricia's name on the screen, and Elliot's heart stopped. Myra's awake and asking for you, she said when he answered. She's okay, just disoriented. I'll be right there. He stood, abandoning his food, his entire focus narrowing to getting back to his daughter. Adrian stood too, concern written across his face. Is she? She's fine. I have to go, right? Of course. Adrian hesitated. Elliot? Thank you. For talking to me. For eating. For not telling me to go to hell. Elliot almost laughed at that, because he'd wanted to tell Adrian to go to hell approximately 17 times during this conversation. But he just nodded and walked away, leaving Adrian standing in the waiting room with 2 containers of barely touched food and an expression that looked like hope mixed with grief. We got back to Myra's room. She was sitting up, her face pale and her eyes glassy. Papa, I had a bad dream. What about little Moon? He settled into the chair beside her, taking her hand. There was a man with gray eyes like mine, and he was sad because I didn't know him. And you were sad because you did know him. She looked at him with those 2 perceptive eyes. Papa, is my other parent real? The question hung in the air between them, impossible to dodge. Mira had asked before, when she was 4, why she only had a papa when other kids had mommies and daddies, or 2 mommies or 2 daddies. Elliot had explained that families looked different, that sometimes people had 1 parent, and sometimes 2, and sometimes lots, and Mira had accepted that easily. But now she was asking something different. Now she was asking if her other parent existed. Elliot took a breath. Honesty. His therapist had been clear about this. Autistic children needed honesty even when it was hard. Yes, he said quietly. Your other father is real. You've never met him because things were complicated. But he's real. Mira processed this, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her blanket in a self-soothing stim. Is he the man with gray eyes? Yes. Is he the one helping me get better? Smart girl. Too smart. Yes. Can I meet him? Elliot's heart clenched. He'd thought they'd have more time. Thought he could ease her into this, prepare both of them. But Mira was asking directly, and he couldn't lie to her. Do you want to? He asked carefully. She thought about it, really thought about it in that deliberate way she approached big questions. Finally, she nodded. I think so. He's part of me, right? Like you're part of me. Biologically, yes. Then I should meet him. To know the whole picture. To know the whole picture. His 6-year-old daughter was approaching her own parentage like a scientific inquiry, and Elliot loved her so much it hurt. Okay, he said, when you're feeling a little better, when the medicine isn't making you so sick, we can arrange for you to meet him. But Mira, I need you to understand something. She waited, giving him her full attention despite her obvious exhaustion. Just because he's your biological father doesn't mean he gets to be in your life if you don't want him to be. You get to decide. Always. Your feelings and your comfort come first. Okay? Okay, Papa. And if at any point you change your mind, if you decide you don't want to know him, that's okay too. I'll support whatever you choose. I know. She said it with such simple confidence that Elliot almost broke down right there. Despite everything, despite the chaos and the sickness and the fear, Mira knew she was loved, knew she was safe with him. That had to count for something. She fell back asleep soon after, and Elliot sat in the dim room with his phone in his hand, staring at Adrian's contact information. He should text him, let him know Mira wanted to meet him. But the thought of doing that, of setting that meeting in motion, felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. He'd spent 7 years building a life where Adrian didn't exist. 7 years creating a safe, stable world for himself and Mira. One text could send all of that tumbling down. But Mira had asked, and Elliot had promised himself, when she was born, that he would never be the kind of parent who put his own issues above his child's needs. Mira asked about you, he typed. Asterisk, she wants to meet you. Not today. She's too sick. But soon, when she's having a better day. Asterisk. He sent it before he could change his mind. The response came within seconds. Asterisk, thank you for trusting me with this. I won't let you down, Elliot. I swear I won't let either of you down. Asterisk. Elliot wanted to believe that. Wanted so badly it ached. But belief wasn't something he could afford right now. Not when the stakes were this high. So he just put his phone away and focused on his daughter, on the steady beep of her monitors and the slight whistle of her breathing. This was what mattered. Mira, surviving. Everything else was secondary. Even if it felt like he was watching a train crash in slow motion, unable to do anything but witness it happening. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday afternoon, 5 days after the first chemotherapy session. Mira was having what Dr. Reeves called a good day, which meant she'd only vomited twice and could sit up without looking like she might pass out. The bar for good had gotten devastatingly low. Elliot had spent those 5 days coaching Mira, explaining who Adrian was in the simplest terms possible. Your other father. He didn't know about you before, but now he does, and he wants to meet you. But remember, you don't have to like him. You don't have to call him Dad or Daddy or anything. You can just call him Adrian if that feels better. Mira had absorbed this information with her characteristic seriousness, asking clarifying questions. Why didn't he know about me? Did he not want me? Is that why we never talked about him? Each question had felt like a knife between Elliot's ribs. He tried to answer honestly without trauma dumping on his 6-year-old. It was complicated, adult stuff. But the important thing is that he wants to help you get better, and he wants to know you now. Okay, Mira had said, and gone back to the dinosaur documentary they'd been watching. Now, sitting in her hospital room while they waited for Adrian to arrive, Elliot felt like he might crawl out of his skin. His leg bounced rapidly, a stim he couldn't control, and his hands kept fidgeting with the fabric of his pants. Mira noticed, she always noticed, and reached over to squeeze his hand 3 times. I love you, in their secret language. Elliot squeezed back 3 times. I love you too. It's gonna be okay, Papa, she said, which was wrong on every level because she was the 6-year-old with cancer and he was supposed to be comforting her, not the other way around. I know, little moon. The knock came exactly at 2 o'clock because Adrian had always been pathologically punctual. Elliot stood, his heart hammering, and opened the door. Adrian looked terrified. There was no other word for it. He looked absolutely terrified, his face pale and his hands clenched at his sides like he was physically restraining himself from bolting. He dressed carefully, Elliot noticed. Nice jeans, a soft blue sweater, nothing too formal or intimidating. He'd thought about this, about how to present himself to a 6-year-old. "Hi," Adrian said, his voice unsteady. "Hi." Elliot stepped aside, letting him in. "Mira, this is Adrian." "Adrian, this is Mira." Mira was sitting up in bed, surrounded by her dinosaur toys arranged in what probably looked like chaos to anyone else, but was actually a very specific arrangement based on diet and size. She looked at Adrian with those gray eyes they shared, assessing him with an intensity that would have been unnerving if Elliot wasn't used to it. "You have my eyes," she said finally. Adrian's breath hitched. Yeah, I do. Or you have mine, I guess. Genetically, we share approximately 50% of our DNA. Mira continued in that precise way she had when she was processing something challenging. "Which means you're half responsible for my genetic makeup." That's right. Adrian looked at Elliot helplessly, like he had no idea how to talk to this strange, brilliant child. Elliot suppressed the urge to intervene. Mira could handle this. She was stronger than people gave her credit for. "Papa says you didn't know about me before," Mira said. "Why not? Direct." Of course she'd go direct. Adrian crouched down, so he was at her eye level, which was smart. "Because your papa and I stopped talking before he knew you existed. That was my fault, and I'm really sorry about it." Mira considered this. "Papa said it was complicated adult stuff." It was. But the short version is that I wasn't a very good husband, and your papa had to leave to keep himself safe. I don't blame him for not telling me about you. He was protecting you." Elliot's throat tightened. Adrian was being so careful, so thoughtful about how he framed this. Not blaming Elliot, not making excuses, just stating facts in a way Mira could understand. "Are you a better person now?" Mira asked. "I'm trying to be. I don't know if I've succeeded, but I'm working on it every day." "That's good. Papa says people who work on being better are usually worth knowing." She paused. "Are you the one who's going to give me your bone marrow?" "Yes." "Will it hurt you?" Adrian's expression softened. "A little bit, yeah, but nothing like what you're going through. And if it helps you get better, it's worth it." Mira nodded slowly, then reached over to her arranged dinosaurs and picked up a small brachiosaurus. She held it out to Adrian. "This is my favorite dinosaur. Papa got it for me when I was 4. Brachiosaurus was a herbivore, which means it only ate plants. I like that it was big enough to defend itself without having to hurt other animals." Adrian took the toy like it was made of glass. "She's beautiful. What's her name?" "Luna. Like the moon. Because Papa calls me his little moon." "That's a perfect name." Adrian's voice was thick with emotion. He looked up at Elliot, and there was something devastating in his expression. Gratitude and grief and wonder all mixed together. "You can hold her while we talk," Mira said generously. "Sometimes holding Luna helps when I'm nervous." "Thank you. I am pretty nervous." "Because you're meeting me?" "Yeah, I really wanted to make a good first impression." Mira tilted her head, thinking about this. "Papa says first impressions don't matter as much as consistent behavior over time. He says people can be good at pretending to be nice at first but show their true self later." Adrian's face went through several complicated emotions. "Your papa is very wise." "I know." She said it with such matter-of-fact confidence that Adrian actually laughed, a startled, genuine sound. They talked for 20 minutes, Mira asking questions and Adrian answering with careful honesty. "Where did he live?" "In a house downtown, but it's too big and kind of lonely." "What did he do for work?" "I'm a doctor for children with heart problems." "Did he like dinosaurs?" "I didn't know much about them before, but I'd love to learn." Elliot watched it all from his chair by the window, his heart doing complicated things in his chest. This was going better than he'd expected. Mira wasn't overwhelmed. Adrian wasn't pushing too hard, and the conversation felt almost normal. Then Mira asked the question Elliot had been dreading. "Adrian, do you want to be my dad?" The room went silent. Adrian's hands tightened on Luna the Brachiosaurus, and he looked at Elliot with desperation in his eyes, clearly asking, "What do I say?" Elliot gave a tiny nod. Asterisk truth. "Tell her the truth. Asterisk." Adrian turned back to Mira. "I would love to be your dad, if that's something you'd want. But I also know that I missed the first 6 years of your life, and I can't just waltz in and expect you to feel like I'm your father right away. So maybe we could start as friends? Get to know each other? And if you decide someday that you want to call me Dad, that would be amazing. But there's no pressure. You get to decide what our relationship looks like. Mira absorbed this, her fingers automatically sorting and resorting her dinosaurs by size. Finally, she said, I think friends is good. I don't know you well enough for Dad yet. That makes perfect sense. But maybe eventually. She looked up at him. If you're a good friend first, I'll do my best. Adrian's voice cracked. I promise I'll do my best. Okay. Mira yawned, the conversation clearly exhausting her. I'm tired now, but you can come back and visit again if you want. Maybe tomorrow, unless I'm too sick. Sometimes the medicine makes me too sick for visitors. I'll check with your papa first, Adrian said, standing. Make sure it's okay with him. It's okay with me, Mira said. Papa, is it okay with you? 3 pairs of eyes turned to Elliot. Myra's trusting, Adrian's hopeful and terrified, and his own reflection in the darkened window, looking haunted and exhausted. Yes, he heard himself say, it's okay with me. Adrian smiled, and it transformed his entire face. Thank you, both of you. Thank you. He handed Luna back to Mira, who clutched the toy to her chest. Then he nodded to Elliot and headed for the door. Adrian, Mira called out, and he turned. You did okay. For first impression, Adrian laughed, the sound thick with unshed tears. High praise. I'll try to do even better next time. Then he was gone, and Elliot was alone with his daughter, who was looking at him with far too much understanding for a 6-year-old. He's sad, she observed. Yeah, he is. Because he missed my whole life? Yeah. That's his fault, though. You said he wasn't good to you, so you had to leave. It's complicated, little moon. Adults always say that when they mean yes, but I don't want to explain. Elliot couldn't help it. He laughed. You're too smart for your own good. I know. She snuggled down into her blankets, Luna tucked under her chin. Papa? I think I like him. Is that okay? The question hit him harder than it should have. Of course it's okay. You're allowed to like him, Mira. You're allowed to want a relationship with him. That doesn't hurt me. It was a lie. It did hurt him, in a strange, complicated way he couldn't quite articulate. But it was also true, because what he wanted more than anything was for Mira to have everything she deserved, even if that included Adrian. Okay, good. Her eyes were already drifting closed. Love you, Papa. 3 squeezes. Love you too, little moon. 3 squeezes. He sat with her until she fell asleep, watching her breathe, counting each exhale like a prayer. When he finally pulled out his phone, there was a message from Adrian. Asterisk, thank you for that. I know it cost you, letting me in. I won't take it for granted. Asterisk. Elliot stared at the message for a long time before typing back. Asterisk, she liked you. That's what matters. Asterisk. Asterisk, and you? What do you think? Asterisk. The question sat there, demanding an answer Elliot didn't know how to give. What did he think? That Adrian had been surprisingly good with Mira? That he'd been careful and respectful, and everything Elliot could have hoped for? That it terrified him how easy it had been, how natural. I think you did well today, he finally replied. Don't make me regret letting you in. Asterisk, I won't. I promise, Elliot. I won't. Asterisk. Elliot hoped that was true, because if Adrian hurt Mira the way he'd hurt him, there would be no coming back from it. No forgiveness, no second chances. He would destroy Adrian completely. But for now, for tonight, he let himself believe that maybe this could work. That maybe Adrian really had changed. That maybe Mira could have 2 parents who loved her, even if those parents could never love each other again. Maybe it was the best Elliot could offer. And for now, it would have to be enough.